coffee, selling at 1,200, 1,560 and £1,500 and sold. And the final lot of the evening, Rotary International, written by Norman Proctor. And there's a squiggle inside. I wonder if that's a genuine signature. Is the author here by any chance?
Yes.
Oh. Is this your signature? Oh. Well, there's an exciting lot. I think I'll hand over to you now.
Norman Henry Proctor, this is your life. Well, Norman, are you ready for this? You're worried, I can tell.
First time.
Right. Can everybody hear?
Yes.
Those that say no, I can't do anything about it. Right, we'll start at the beginning. Norman Henry Proctor was born on the 2nd of December, 1928. The middle child of 3 boys to William Henry and Mabel Proctor, with the family then living in Bath. Work for William Proctor meant that the family were often to move house many times, resulting in a number of changes of school. 5 in all, I believe, Norman?
Okay.
Yeah. In 1938, the family finally settled in Grappenhall. What a wonderful name. In Grappenhall, a village outside Warrington, and young Norman was entered into the local Lymm Grammar School, which first dates from 1592. Just a little after you were born, I think. There, is that the picture of it?
That is indeed.
That is the school. Well, there you go. Look at that. The school gained a royal charter in 1601. Here, at this school, under the care of headmaster J.R. Canny and various form mistresses, Norman studied the usual range of subjects, inevitably some better than others. History was always good, whereas French seemed quite problematic. Poor has made no effort, and has made very little effort. Those from 1944, whereas earlier there had seemed to be some promise. Conduct was mixed with satisfactory, could talk much less, and he talks too much. That explains his lower position. The sciences, too, were mixed, starting off very well in 1942 with is making steady progress and a really keen and diligent worker. But by the time 1944 arrived, there was, he can do better than this. Was young Norman itching to leave school for a life in the Royal Navy? I wonder. It would have been fun to have been able to meet Mr. Canny, the headmaster, and let him see how well young Proctor has done in his life. but sadly, he passed away many years ago. Goodness knows what age he'd be now. Anyway, Norman joined the Royal Navy at the age of 15 as an apprentice. Look at that. As an apprentice, is it artificer?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Artificer, I don't know what it is, but it sounds wonderful. And was based at Rosyth in Scotland. This establishment specialised in training engineers, and so began the road to becoming a chartered engineer. Norman stayed in the Royal Navy until he was 28 years old, eventually buying himself out of the Navy for the magnificent sum of £269. Takes you back, eh? Yeah. During these 13 years, Norman seemed to have a good naval career, meeting the Queen aboard HMS Chequers. Prince Philip, I'm told, was his first lieutenant, and he seems to have made a point of bumping into Prince Charles whenever he could. The essence of the Navy was summed up by Norman recently as, it built teamwork. An attribute I imagine Norman has excelled in throughout his long and illustrious career in industry and later in Rotary. During the early part of his naval career, Norman was obliged to attend a family funeral in Gloucester. After this sad event, Norman's aunt sent him off out for the evening to a dance rather than stay at home with the oldies. It was here that Norman and Joyce first met. Being a gentleman, he walked Joyce home. And they met again the following day after church, and so began a romance that was to last for more than 55 years. And all this despite having the garage turned over to Norman's N-gauge model railway. It must have been quite a wrench to eventually have to let that go. After a 2.5-year engagement, Joyce and Norman were married on the 18th of August 1951, honeymooning at Newquay. And it was here that they both enjoyed some ballroom dancing lessons. I gather you were quite a ballroom dancer. Yes. Not long afterwards, Norman was posted to Malta, and Joyce followed on, finding herself a job with a local Valletta businessman. This money was to be used to provide the deposit on their first house, 14 Pelham Crescent, Churchdown, Gloucester. Now, Norman, who in the Royal Navy was known as Jim.
Short for Muggins.
And you were also known as Jim to Joyce,
Yes.
is that right?
Yes, correct.
If that's not too confusing a sentence. So tell me, how did that come about, Norman?
Well, it was short for Muggins. A lady called Mamie Lamb in Lynn Grammar School was known for making all the boys. She was a guide, and we were learning to dance by straight lines going up and down the sports hall, and all of the boys were named whatever, and I happened to be Muggins, so I became Jim.
You became Jim. Lovely. Nice story. Thank you very much. Anyway, for those of you who knew Joyce and Norman / Jim, you will not be surprised to hear that although always a focused and ambitious person, it was Joyce who was the one who ruled the roost at home. She, I am told, was the keeper of the purse strings, throughout their life together. Norman has often said he hadn't had a pocket rise since 1966. And now, for us all, here is that great poem by Pam Ayres, reading out one of Norman's and no doubt Joyce's favourite poems too, about a man who can put the world to rights. I don't know what this has got to do with you, Norman, but there you go. They should have asked my husband. Pam Ayres.
You know, this world is complicated and imperfect and oppressed, and it's not hard to feel timid, apprehensive, and depressed. It seems that all around us tides of questions ebb and flow, and people want solutions, but they don't know where to go. Opinions abound, but who is wrong and who is right? No, people need a prophet, a diffuser of the light. someone they can turn to as the crises rage and swirl, someone with the remedy, the wisdom, the pearl. Well, they should have asked my husband. No, he'd have told them. Then and there, his thoughts on immigration, teenage mothers, Tony Blair, the future of the monarchy, house prices in the south, the wait for hip replacements, BSE and foot and mouth. No, they should have asked my husband. He can sort out any mess. He can rejuvenate the railways. He can cure the NHS. So any little niggle, anything you want to know, just run it past my husband, wind him up, and let him go. See? Congestion on the motorways, free holidays for thugs, the damage to the ozone layer, refugees, drugs. These may defeat the brain of any politician bloke, but present it to my husband. He will solve it at a stroke. He'll clarify the situation. He will make it crystal clear. You'll feel the glazing of your eyeballs and the bending of your ear. Corruption at the top, he's an authority on that, and the mafia, Gaddafi and Yasser Arafat. Upon these areas, he brings his intellect to shine in a great, compelling voice that's twice as loud as yours or mine. I often wonder what it must be like to be so strong, infallible, articulate, self-confident and wrong. When it comes to tolerance, he hasn't got a lot. Joyriders should be guillotined and muggers should be shot. The sound of his own voice becomes like music to his ears, and he hasn't got an inkling that he's boring us to tears. Oh, it's relentless. It's unstoppable. The hunting ban was grim. I fantasise at night about the hounds pursuing him. One thing, and one thing only, caused a smile his face to crack. At last, we beat Australia. And we got the Ashes back. Hooray!
Do you know, all the time that was running, I don't know whether you were aware, Norman was saying all the words. He knows them all.
I wrote most of it.
Of course, the highlight of Joyce and Norman's lives together will have been the birth of their children, Nigel in 1965 and Sue in 1961. But more about these two brilliant lawyers a little bit later. In the mid-1960s, Norman moved the family to Plymouth as he took up a post with the Industrial Training Board. At this same time, the family bought the house that would remain their family home for some 45 years in Fursat Avenue. Brings back happy memories, I guess, yeah? Mm. We move on a little bit. It must have been shortly after this move that Norman was taken on by Calumet Group, where he rose rapidly through the ranks and became MD of this very large Plymouth-based manufacturer for many years until it was sold out to an asset stripper, who I am told tore the heart out of the business. Is that right, Norman?
Yes. Holman's, Franco Controls, to Calumet, he stripped the West Country of manufacturing.
Goodness me. Golly. That must have left you feeling quite bitter, I would think. Anyway, the garage equipment business introduced Norman to many other local businessmen, not least of whom was Peter Vosper of the Vosper Motor House Group. Sorry, I just want to make sure I get that one right. Where Norman found a new home as their project director from 1984 to his official retirement in 2009. Now, although Peter cannot be with us tonight, he has sent this video message to you.
Hello Norman, sorry I can't be with you tonight. I'm sure you're going to have a great evening. For the rest of you, Norman and I met many years ago when Norman was to Falmouth and Waspers were looking after the fleet of vans there, and Norman decided that he might too have a Ford at one time, and he can tell you a funny story about that. But very, very luckily for us, the opportunity came for Norman to join us later on in life, and having spent well over 20 years with us now, Norman has been an absolute source of great works for us. Everything Norman does, he does with passion, and our lives have crossed one another in other circumstances outside of work, and he has been a man that never takes anything lightly. He loves life and he gives his all. He's given a lot to many charities, the Rotary, as you know, and indeed to training young people here at Waspers with his great enthusiasm. I hope Norman has a great night tonight. He really deserves it. Thank you. Well done, Norman.
Thank you, Peter Foster. Would you feel inclined to tell us the funny story about buying the Ford you mentioned? Or is that back in the dim distant past?
Well, no, there's quite a number. I had obviously into Calumet, I had regular cars, and I changed from Jaguars to Ford on that, and I had a brand new Ford Granada, which I drove to our depot in Sheffield, and I was having great trouble driving it. It was an automatic, and I really couldn't use the car very well, and threatened when I got back to drive the car through the showroom window because it was rubbish. And in due course I went up in Peter's office while the technical staff had a look at it, and the then service manager came up and said they quickly found the fault. It was the carpet that was underneath the accelerator. And I'm supposed to be an engineer.
Lovely. Thank you for... Oh, wonderful. Well done. Nice story. Norman, if you didn't know this already, is a man of many facets and interests. Football referee, mentor and advisor to organisations such as Young Enterprise Companies in Cornwall and Devon. Committee member, for example, the CBI Education and Training Committee. Volunteer, for example, the Arusha... Is that the right pronunciation? It'll do, will it? Right, good. Arusha Leper Colony and Street Children's Home in Arusha in Tanzania. The Jubilee Sailing Trust, helping to fit out sailing training ship Tenacious. Advocate on behalf of RIBI in connection with the Shelterbox charity at over 100 events to date. In the wake of the Gujarat disaster, and so the list goes on and on. But perhaps most of all, Norman is an engineer. And no one knows this better than Mr. Dennis Wilkins, former president of the Association of the Surgeons of Great Britain and Ireland for 2000 and 2002. It is through Dennis that a trusteeship was offered and accepted for the Peninsula Medical Foundation, which since 2002 has raised almost £4 million for medical research, equipment and student bursaries at the Peninsula College of Medicine and Dentistry. But let's hear a little bit more about Norman's contribution as a trustee of the foundation from the man himself, Dennis Wilkins.
Hello, Norman. Hello, Mr. Proctor. You don't know.
Sorry about that.
You don't know me, Mr. Proctor. Went the conversation in 1996. wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
You don't know me.
With the funeral director.
That's
All the
right,
parties.
boys. You don't know me, Mr. Proctor, but I know about you. And we're setting up a new charity to support the new medical school. It was the Plymouth Postgraduate Medical School in those days. how about joining the Board of Trustees? So Norman, always being up for a good cause, said yes and was suckered in. And thereafter, here we are 18 years later, just about, aren't we? So, yeah, we got to know each other. We put up with his awful jokes and stories. But we did that because it was good value in other ways. And we built up the files. And do you remember who the other trustees were? There was Wally Parsons. Yeah.
And the Vicar of St Jude's,
Yeah.
whose name now escapes me.
Gordon Cryer.
Gordon Cryer.
Yeah, anybody know Gordon?
And the man who's on BBC television and radio now.
David Fitzgerald. David Fitzgerald. Now,
You were the five.
David coined the term for this, the Fountain Foundation. Well, we like the name, you know, Fountain of Knowledge and all that sort of stuff, didn't we?
We did.
But it didn't last when the politically correct medical school people got hold of it. But he invented the tie. And who else was there?
The man from Cornwall, the medical man who just retired.
Yes, that's right. And Craig Rich.
Yes.
And he was good.
He organised the first concert. The Plymouth Police Choir, and we raised £18.
That's right. Now, that's right. And I have a copy of the poster.
Oh, right.
For that one.
March
Which I'll put in the book.
1997, yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that a splendid occasion? We
Absolutely.
launched that in '97, and it was the Plymouth Police Choir,
Yes.
St Joseph's School Girl Choir,
Yeah.
very nice. The Laveni, and we had Judy Spires, who was
Yes, that's right.
lenient, wasn't it? And Lord Owen came along.
Yes, we did.
Shook our hands and so forth. And we made £35.
35. Sorry.
But that wasn't the purpose of it. It was a great night. When Norman spoke, people listened, and we built up this enormous file. And it didn't matter how far back it was. Norman had it in the back of his book, and could always put us right. One of the things I remember, and I'm sure it was you who said this. The medical school went through several changes. First of all, it was the postgraduate school, wasn't it?
Yes.
And then we knew we were working really towards building an undergraduate school. That was the goal. And it was John Bull who was the
Yes.
who was the vice chancellor at that time. And the request for bids came in for a new undergraduate school. And then we heard that he was going to get into partnership with Exeter. And I remember you saying, don't get into bed with Exeter. How many people from Exeter are here? Come on, own up. How are you getting on with the knives and forks, all right? But I have to say, it was a happy relationship to get us off, but in the end it did end in tears, just as you said. So there's the wise head. Yes, and the jokes. I mean, we try and forget the jokes as soon as we can, but I've got one that I think I've probably heard from you, and it was about a lady in the car park, a young mother, coming out with her arms full in the supermarket. Does that ring any bells? And, yeah, it would do. And she had got to the car and found that she'd locked herself out of the car. Well, there she was, and the situation was desperate. She was soon in tears, and this military man standing nearby came over and said, "What's up, love? What's up?" And she said, all the rest of it. And he said, "Don't worry." And he proceeded to take off his trousers. Does this sound like one of Norman's jokes?
Yes.
Yeah, that does. Took off his trousers and he rolled them up in a ball and he rubbed it on the door. And the door opened. And she said, "That's marvellous. How did you do that?" And he said, "These are my car keys."
They can be that cool.
Norman, you've done a great job. And there's three of us still standing. Sheridan Brimacombe, you and me.
Yeah.
And when you consider that the charity has actually had £4 million through its books at various times, not all of us, actually the majority wasn't actually raised by us, but we did handle it, and we did good things with it, and it was due to a lot of it to Norman's contacts. We know that we've had a lot from you guys in the Rotary and been supported by that through Norman, for which we're very grateful.
40,000 in one lump sum.
In one lump sum. Great job, Norman. Well done.
Thank you.
Remarkable.
Thank
thank you, Dennis Hilton. You can sit next to him if you really want to. Yeah. Good. Lovely to hear somebody's personal memories. It's really, really great. Now, Rotary life. Norman, as many of you will know, was a founder member and president of Saltram Plimpton Rotary Club 1984 to 1985, and remains a member so to this day. He has been heavily involved with District 1290 matters since the district was formed in 1989, serving continuously on a wide variety of its committees, and became district governor for the year 1993-94. Now Norman, with his known passion for history, thanks of course to Lim Grammar School, wrote a 21-year history of his home club, which he has since updated for its 25-year anniversary. Many clubs quite possibly wish they too had an historian amongst their membership. And that of course was the final book, I think, that was failed to be auctioned, which is terribly sad. We'll have to do something about it. And if you thought that club and district would ever satisfy Norman, well, you are much mistaken. RIBI committees soon beckoned. But let me introduce you to one of Norman's fellow founder members and long-standing friend, Mark Jewell. Mark, will you come and join us? Now, Mark, you have some memories of a visit to one conference in Barcelona, don't you, I believe?
Yes, I've got a few others as well, if you wish to.
Good, please do.
Can you see me behind this? Be honest. Oh, that's good. Norman and I have known each other over 40 years. That's a long time. That's more than half my lifetime. We first met at Calumet. I was a contractor, and Norman was then the MD of the group. And he still bossed. He still watched everything I did, telling me I could do a better job and so on, but he was good. And we then met up when we formed the Rotary Club of Saltram, and he became the first president and I became the first senior vice. And I've followed in his footsteps ever since. It's, and then in year 2000, 2001, Norman was elevated to the president of RIBI and I became the district governor. And that was quite a pat on the back for our club. It truly was, and they really rose to the occasion, Norman, didn't they? In a brilliant way. That year we didn't see an awful lot of one another because we went our separate ways, doing different things, but we both had very successful conferences. But towards the end of the year, Joyce, Norman, Sue, my wife, and myself went to Texas. And we had a great time, didn't we? Touring Texas, the eastern part of Texas. We didn't go into the Panhandle, that was stupid. But we had a wonderful time, and we ended up in San Antonio. And there a Mexican guy, a barmy fella, rode into the opening of the ceremony on a horse he had no control of, with a sombrero on, trying to claim back the Alamo. Was that right, Frank? Bless you. He was great fun, that man. Moving on, we travelled the world together. We truthfully did, from one convention to another, with dear Joyce, still there, supporting us all. And in Barcelona, we decided that we would hire a villa near a place called Girona. And we had a week in this villa, and it was really, really nice. We hired a car, and we toured the area. Anyway, the penultimate day of leaving to go to Barcelona, Norman had to go to Barcelona on a convention committee meeting. So I dropped him off at the railway station, and off he went. And the girls packed up, ready to go to Barcelona the following day. And we all went down to the station to meet Norman at an agreed time, when we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And some 3 hours later, this guy got off the train, given a very good description of the guy from Quasimodo. That's the guy. Quasimodo. He got off the train, and unbeknown to us, Norman, in rushing to get the train in Barcelona, fell on a manhole cover and damaged his knee and damaged his shoulder. So we managed to get him back into the car, and we got into the villa. Now, Norman, as you know, is quite a lot bigger than me. I mean, I'm sort of bigger, but shorter. And anyway, he used me like a walking stick trying to get up the villa steps. And we eventually got him into bed. Joyce was not impressed with his cussing and his swearing, because Joyce was very prim and proper. And the following day, we got to Barcelona, and we got to the hotel, and we were unloading the cases, and Norman was sat in the front seat, and he puts his briefcase with all the notes from the convention onto the pavement, and a passerby rushed past and picked it up and ran off with it. So the hotel staff, it wasn't very ready at the time, because I had only just had my knee replaced, and no, so lumbered with these pains and aches. So anyway, the police came and said there's nothing they could do about the briefcase, but they were very concerned about the condition of Norman. And so they took him off with Joyce to hospital. And some 4 hours later he arrives back with the information that he must rest his knee as much as possible and not walk, which meant that he had to go in a wheelchair. Now that's when you push your friendship to the limit. Believe me. Anyway, I pushed Norman around the convention, and isn't that amazing? When you've got somebody in a wheelchair, everybody talks to him, but not the mule at the back. And they all knew me, but they didn't speak to the mule, they only spoke to Norman. But anyway, time went on, and the convention finished, and we decided to go to the Gaudi Park. Now the Gaudi Park is quite an inspirational architectural design. But to get there, we decided to go by bus, because by now we got rid of the car. So we catch the bus, but the bus sort of stops at the bottom of a hill going up to Gaudi Park. So there's Norman in his wheelchair, and me pushing Norman up this hill. And I was getting wheel spin with my feet. And in the end, Joyce came around and sort of pushed me, and then Sue got the other side and pushed me, and we were better scrum than Penryn pilots. And anyway, we eventually get to the top with a huge struggle, and Norman smiled all the way. He was very good. And we walked around the Gaudi Park for an hour or two, and then we came to the point where we had to go back. And I pushed Norman across the top of the hill, and we stopped there, and we looked down the hill. He looked down the hill. I looked down the hill. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I said, I reckon in 10 yards apart, we'll be doing the sound barrier, and you're on your own. With that, he got up, walked across the road, got into a taxi, and left me with the empty wheelchair. So anyway, that's him, bless him, he's been a wonderful friend. He's been the best friend that I've ever had in my life. And thank you, Norman.
Mark Shaw, ladies and gentlemen. Right, Jaipur Lim. The Rotary Jaipur Lim project is a proactive fundraising and project initiating body of Rotarians, as you probably know, drawn from all over RIBI. It was formed in 1985 and became a registered charity in 1995. There are 9 trustees, assisted by several co-opted managers, who divide their time between raising awareness of the project among Rotarians in RIBI, identifying appropriate sites for projects, principally in India and Africa, and assisting in the preparation of programs, budgets and financing for those projects. The bulk of their work in India revolves around limb camps, with as many as 3,000 patients turning up for help. But in Africa and other countries outside India, they establish new permanent centres and provide ongoing support for them by way of technician training, materials and equipment. Now in July 2004, Norman was appointed Public Relations Officer of Jaipur Lim, and you know what the Jaipur limb is, I imagine. If you've not come across it before, it's an artificial leg developed at the Mahiva Hospital in Jaipur, India. The unique component is the Jaipur foot, a clever combination of wood and various densities of rubber vulcanized into a realistic looking brown foot. The Jaipur limb is hard wearing and will last for 3 or 4 years, especially longer probably if worn with a shoe. Now, a limb centre is to be built in Tangieta, Benin, in memory of Norman's wife, Joyce. And here to tell us more about Norman and Joyce's involvement with Jaipur limb is George Buckley from the Rotary Club of Pali, here in person. Give him a round of applause. Thank you.
In fact, when I got hold of this mic, I thought the nose was already bleeding. But I've known Norman since mid-90s, when I was a district officer and went to Birmingham to study to become a true Rotarian. And then I got taught by Norman. He was there as my sort of teacher. We learnt a lot. And then, of course, I found out as I was moving up towards being a district governor, who was going to be the RIBI president, the same guy who taught me how to be a Rotarian. So I had Norman for a long while. But he was a good leader and a really good friend. You could rely on him for anything. He was absolutely superb. We had 1 or 2 little mishaps when he was the actual the president. We went on one occasion to a dinner, and I said to Norman, I think it's black tie. This club usually wear black tie, and we'll have to dress up. So we got dressed, all in our black ties, and Joyce and my wife Joyce, all dressed in their finery. We got there and I crept in, and they were all wearing just like you are tonight, shirts and overneck. So we shot out into the car park, and there Norman and I changed in the back of the car. Fortunately, the police weren't about at the time, so we were quite lucky and got away with it. But when our years were finished, Norman suggested to me, because I've got an artificial limb, that it'd be a good idea if I start doing some talking for Jaipur limb. And I became a speaker working with Jaipur limb, and I've been involved with it ever since. Norman, being Norman, then came up with an idea. They were opening a new group in a new centre in Uganda. He said, it'd be rather nice if you could go out there and with Don Short, and you could, be at the opening. He said that would be nice, and they do need to learn about the upper bits, the upper limbs. So they're very good at making legs, but not very good at the upper limbs. Can you get some pieces? So I rang some people I knew in the business, because I've had a limb since I was 17, so that's about 12 years ago. You're not supposed to laugh at that. I was fine. I got hold of quite a few bits and pieces of limbs, and 4 caseloads in the end. I rang BA as it is now, BO's AC as it was then. It would have been if it hadn't gone bust because of Nan ruining it. I got 4, and they were very kind. They said they would take all 4 or 5 cases, and I got upgraded as well to business class, which was very nice for an 8-hour flight to Entebbe. I arrived in Entebbe, 5 cases on my trolley, and Don Short's waiting outside for me. I'm pushing the trolley with my 5 cases, and I got stopped by the customs. Without thinking, then the guy said to me, "What's in the cases?" I said, "Arms." Very unwise. But the last time I was with Norman was at Lisbon the last year at the convention. We were actually doing the Jaipur limb stand out there, Norman was out there with us, and we spent a lot of time, because we're both getting old and don't want to walk too much now, do we, Norman? And we sat there quite happily doing all that, and then we discovered he'd got an MBE. And I thought, oh, that's wonderful. And somebody said, what's that then, Norman? He said, it's a member of the British Empire, Order of the British Empire. I said, no, it's not, it's a miserable bloody elderly. But I had to really explain to him that the correct title is that it's Norman Proctor, member of the most excellent order of the British Empire. That's what he is. And real strong stuff. But then we got a strong man. One of the things that came up in Lisbon was we found this American hand, which Norman will probably tell you about if you ask him. And it's on the stand out, I see, out in the House of Friendship. It's a marvellous hand, it works well. And we, the 5 of us that were there, were very keen to show everybody as they came up, look, you can put a fork in here, you can put a pen in here, and you can do this and you can do that, and all these things you could do with this marvellous hand. And it is very good. But not Norman. Norman said, you can grip a pen, and what's the first thing they do when they get a pen in their hand? And the answer, of course, is they write their name. The next thing Norman used to say, what's the next thing they do? And you think, well, they get a pair of scissors, one. But Norman would say, no, they'd wipe the tears from their eyes, that they'd been able to do something for themselves. Now that, when someone says that and speaks that way, talks volumes. Norman is someone who cares, someone who worries about other people. He's one of the finest people I know. I'm privileged to have known him since the mid-90s, and I still feel it's a privilege to know him now. Norman, have a great time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Make yourself comfortable down there. Great. Now, as many of you will know, Norman was RIBI president in 2000-2001. He's attended all RIB conferences since 1983 to date. Is that right?
Correct.
Grief. That's quite an undertaking and achievement in itself. When Norman was RIBI president, there was a Mexican businessman and entrepreneur, president of Latin America's leading optical company, called Frank Devlin. Well, Frank shares Norman's interest in history and has penned, as we know, a few books himself. So at vast expense, entirely his own, you understand, Frank, from the Rotary Club of, oh, I can't even pronounce it.
City of Mexico.
City of Mexico, that's all right, I can pronounce that, that's fine. Joins us tonight for this tribute to his friend Norman. Frank, will you come up and join us? Thank you.
Family of Rotary, it's indeed a pleasure to be here on an evening where we're recognizing an outstanding Rotarian. We found out Norman, with Jim, but Muggins, I don't know if those names coming up, but all that you've done in life, that young fella going up the ladder, and some of you come into Rotary. And there's people who come into Rotary that just come into Rotary and that's it. But there's some that come into Rotary that make a difference. Norman, you're a person who's made a difference in your club, your district, here in RIBI. Those of us who have the honor of having higher positions, how come he should be the next international president of Rotary? And we always thought you were going to put your name in, you never did. But we want you to know that you're recognized. And tonight we've had this opportunity of seeing all the good work that you've done. How the people feel about you. Norman, it's an honor to have you as a friend. And knowing that you've done so much for mankind, humanity, you've stood out. You're the kind of person people look up to and the kind of person that we all aspire to be. Thank you for being that outstanding personality, that person who's done so much for Rotary, because you make Rotary stand out. You make us proud of being Rotarians. So family of Rotary, we honor someone who is someone. So I ask you all to rise and give him a round of applause for our friend, Norman Proctor. Congratulations.
Now, Norman has played a very significant role in his adopted community of Plymouth and the Southwest, both of which help to illustrate Norman's engineering skills. Firstly, we shall hear from Anne Thorne, head teacher of Long Cause Community School in Plimpton, where Norman had involvement with a new gazebo in the garden. Let's hear from Anne Thorne. It's good to hear the weather is affecting the video as well, isn't it? Obviously getting ready for another one of those lovely storms we've got so used to. Anyway, secondly, we're going to hear from the Reverend Michael Harmon of St Werburgh's Church in Wembury, and using his undisputed engineering skills, Norman has made some items that bring enlightenment to this beautiful church building. So over to you, Reverend Michael Harmon.
Hello now, welcome to St Werburgh's Church, Wembury. I'm Michael Harmon, I'm the priest in charge here, and Norman is one of our regular members here and has made many contributions to the church, and we have a lot of affection for him here, and it's a delight to be able to take part in this tribute to him. One of the significant contributions, very visible ones that he's made, are these new candle holders which he made to go up on our pillars, which we use particularly at Christmas, and we also use them sometimes when brides would like candles for their weddings. We did have a rather functional set, which was not entirely attractive, and was always difficult to use, but Norman has tailored these to each pillar for us, and we use them routinely now. And in Christmas 2010, they were dedicated in memory of his late wife Joyce. So, Norman, I hope you're having a lovely evening. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person tonight, but it's a delight to be part of this tribute to so many of the things you have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael Harmon. Now, as you've already heard, it was in all the newspapers and all the BBC South West channels that in June 2013, Norman Henry Proctor, which I must say sounds a little bit like Norman Stanley Fletcher, was awarded the MBE, sorry, that's an English joke, Frank, was awarded the MBE in the Queen's Birthday Honours List for services to charity and support for businesses. This must have made you very proud, Norman. May I ask who conducted the investiture?
Prince William.
Prince William? Oh, right.
My daughter was absolutely delighted.
Good. And your thoughts of the day were?
Oh, an unbelievable experience.
Yeah? Good. Well, congratulations. Round of applause, I think. Well, by now the mathematicians among you would have worked out that Norman is 80 years old, and you would think by now he might be putting his feet up, but emphatically no. I'm delighted to welcome to the stage our very own District Governor Stephen Lay, who will help to keep us up to date with Norman's activities on behalf of Rotary. Stephen.
Norman is on this conference committee. The last 2 months have been absolute hell keeping this from you. Norman likes to be in control. The lengths that we've had to go to keep this... Oh, and by the way, who's here for a race night? It's not going to happen. We chose the title of the conference, Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, mainly because we knew we were planning this, Norman. I'd like to thank Norman on behalf of Rotary International for all you have done for Rotary and in the name of Rotary. Norman, thank you for inspiring and motivating so many ordinary people to do the truly extraordinary. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, surely after all we've heard about Norman's interests, his business roles, his good works, including his huge input into his Rotary work, it's time for his family to have their say. We start with a brief and charming video sent by Norman's grandchildren.
Hi Grandmother, it's James. Thanks for investing all your money in my train set over the years. I've really enjoyed it. Have a good night.
Hi Grandad, it's Sam here. I'd like to thank you for all the fantastic work and encouragement you've done for me and all the rest of the family over the years, and I hope you have a fantastic evening.
Hi, it's Matt. Thanks for all the help you've given me over the years. I especially enjoyed the farmyard you gave me when I was a kid.
Hi Grandad, it's Nick here. Hope you're having a wonderful evening. Just want to say a quick thank you to all the words of advice I've had over the years, including shouting at me out there over the pitch. Have a great night.
Hello Grandad, this is a big surprise. Look who we found.
Oh, hi Grandad, it's Nick here. We hope you have a wonderful evening. We're all very proud of the advice you've given us over the years.
Thank you, James, Sam, Matt, and Nick. He was the one on the throne. Now, Brother Alan, who is sadly unable to be here with you tonight, has, however, sent you this letter, Norman, and it falls to me to read it to you. I'll read it as best I can. First, I would like to say how nice of all concerned to organise this tribute to Norman after his well-deserved MBE. Eileen and I are really very sorry we cannot be with you tonight, but given our health, the trip from Conwy, North Wales to Falmouth was just too much for us. We hope you have a fantastic evening. Norman and I grew up together in Bath and then Grappan Hall near Warrington, Cheshire. We moved from Bath when Norman was very young, so he will not remember much of those very early years, prior to moving to Grappan Hall in 1937. Norman went to Grappan Hall Village School and I was at Stockton Heath Council School. 1939 brought the war and I left school to start work, whereas Norman passed the 11 plus and went, as we know, to Lymm Grammar School. Being at different schools and with the onset of war, we had different friends and lived separate lives in many respects. However, I do recall choir practices and church services together. Norman always took the solos at Christmas, whilst I carolled with other choristers. Not quarrelled, but carolled. Norman would carol sing alone, presumably, so he would not have to share the proceeds. Brotherly love for you. He was quite a wheeler dealer, he says, and I recall would often leave the house with some worthless toy and return with something of much more value. Quite a young entrepreneur. During the war, as I had joined the Merchant Navy, unfortunately we had little contact. I was away at sea and only had brief periods at home. Norman then left Lymm Grammar School at 16 to join the Royal Navy at Rosyth. Sadly, we did not see each other for long periods. But once the war was over, whenever we were both back home, we would enjoy time together. And then, with our growing families, when Norman and Joyce visited Mum and Dad in Grappan Hall. Eileen and I hope you all have a lovely evening. Alan. Well, now we reach our conclusion and climax. Much of what you have heard tonight has been provided by two very special people in Norman's life. To let them off the hook, however, I want to make it plain that if Norman tells you this fact and that story was incorrect, then it's my fault, not theirs. In other words, they may have supplied the information, but it was me who did the editing for the purpose of our big red book. As a result, my wife and I will be waiting outside the hotel with the engine running as soon as I leave the stage to Norman and his friends, just to get away. But I digress. I think it's time we heard from those two people. So let's roll the final video for Norman. Oh, but wait. I have a message coming through on my earpiece. Oh, it seems that the railway line has been repaired. So please will you welcome Nigel and Susan Proctor and Sue and John Bennett to the stage. if you would like to sort of find yourself a microphone either at that desk or this one, then you'll be heard nicely and you can tell your stories about dear Papa. Yeah? So, tell me, Nigel, what are Dad's sort of traits, would you say?
I realise this has gone on some time, so we'll try and keep this brief. But you realise Dad won't have heard anything tonight, because I know you've got problems with your hearing aid, but then he's normally on transmit rather than receive, so... I'm sure many of you will be out for a drink with Dad, and you'll realise that he will rarely pay. But,
I'm making notes as you speak.
But as you've written in the book, he's not received any pocket money since 1962, so we can understand that. So that's okay. But yeah, in terms of trade, I mean, DIY was obviously a huge thing for Dad.
Yes.
And there are not many things you haven't made for us. I mean, perhaps the largest is the. I think it was my 14th birthday present with the mirror dinghy. It was the best mirror dinghy in Who, or wherever it was, and we took it out, we launched it on the first day, and Dad was my crew. He was a superb engineer, superb craftsman, not a great crew. He forgot, having lovingly prepared this mirror dinghy, he forgot to raise the centreboard as we hit the jetty, and that cracked the casing and it sank. But,
that said, Dad has made many things to fit in various of our houses. Pretty much everything will survive that Dad has made. Probably the house around it will fall down first.
He's a good engineer. So look, so we're going to end on a squabble in the family every night. What does Dad mean to you both?
Well, I think what you've heard tonight, and we've been sat out there listening, is Dad has got the most tremendous drive and energy. Very early memories are always that if you have to leave the house at 9 o'clock, then Dad will be pacing at 8:30, and everything has to run to clockwork. But at 85 years old, I have to say, I'm just incredibly proud about how much energy he has to carry on doing what he does. He does care passionately about lots of things. Irritates the hell out of lots of people lots of the time. We're very proud of him, and it's a very nice tribute, and we're glad that we can be here. I'm sorry the boys couldn't be with us.
I think it's absolutely wonderful. Wonderful. Norman Henry Proctor, would you like to take the stage and take a bow? This is your life. Yeah.
Just the briefest of words. all those people who have made this contribution in here, and of course to the people who started and organised it. I feel so wonderful about it all. The sad thing, of course, is Joyce missed this last experience at the palace with Prince William. But all I can say is, when I joined Rotary, the thing that stands most was, as the interim president of the Rotary Club of Saltram, we went to district, we were then all district 1170, and I went to the district conference at a hotel in Torquay. And we weren't, it was at the Grand Hotel, we weren't staying at the Grand, we were staying at a little hotel next door, because the Grand was full. And Joyce and I went down to dinner on the evening of the Friday. And as we sat there at dinner, a man came across to us and said, "Are you here for the Rotary Conference?" And we said, "Yes, we are." And he said, "Well, you're not sitting there on your own, you're coming to join us." That was the friendship start of Rotary. That was the Rotary Club of Newquay, who were in force at that conference. And that was, for me, the real issue of the friendship that Rotary has meant. And I have to say, in those years since losing my wonderful wife, the friendship of Rotary has added a very significant and important dimension, and I have enjoyed every single minute. And I look at Joyce's photograph every evening and say, the best thing we did in our lives was to join Rotary. And thank you very much indeed.